Rouse had worked the grounds at Wren House for 24 years, and in that time he had learned to read the estate by its sounds. Crunch of gravel at the front when Mr. Callum arrived. The particular silence that followed, the way the whole house drew itself up. Every door closing a fraction tighter, every voice dropping a register. The moment his car turned through the gate, Callum Wren was the kind of man a room rearranged itself for before he had finished entering it. Rouse had seen guests freeze mid-sentence when the man appeared in a doorway. He had seen the household staff develop an unusual interest in the middle distance whenever Callum walked the corridor. What Rouse noticed, his post beneath the east wing windows, was that none of that energy ever reached the old man. Aldo Wren had lived in the east wing for 3 years now, since his hip had made the main staircase impractical. He was 81, slight, with a sharp mind that had begun to lose the odd word the way an old coat loses buttons. One here, one there, nothing ruinous yet. He liked to be read to in the afternoons. He liked strong tea and a window that faced the garden. His world had been arranged for him to be comfortable, and in being arranged for his comfort, it had been arranged to be very small. Watched it happen the way you watch a fire lose its height. Not one dramatic moment, just a gradual settling. The nephew, Uwan, came twice a week. He was Callum's younger cousin, smooth-mannered, always with something tucked behind his smile. He would sit with Aldo for 20 minutes, tidy the medication on the side table, with a proprietary air, and leave. The household staff deferred to him in the east wing. Nobody questioned it. Uwan had a way of making himself quietly indispensable in spaces where the real authority was absent, and Callum was almost never present in the east wing. That was simply how things were. The girl from the agency arrived on a Tuesday in October. Her name was Petra Hale, and she was 24, and she carried a canvas bag with 2 paperback novels and a thermos of her own tea because she had not wanted to presume on the kitchen. The housekeeper, Mrs. Beld, showed her to the east wing and told her the basics. Mr. Aldo liked Dickens, disliked being talked at, took his afternoon medication at 2:30, and then returned to the main house. Petra knocked, sat down across from Aldo with a copy of David Copperfield, and asked if he'd like her to start from the beginning or if he had a page in mind. Aldo looked at her for a moment. "The beginning," he said. "It's been a while." Rouse could not hear the reading from his place in the beds. He could see the window. Within the first week, he noticed that the light in the east sitting room was staying on longer in the afternoons. Within the second week he heard, on a still Thursday, the old man's laughter, short and real, at something she had apparently said. He stood up from the rose beds and listened to make sure heard correctly. He had. Petra came 4 afternoons a week. She was not the sort of person who stood out in a room. She was plainly dressed, quietly spoken, the kind of young woman a busy household absorbs without registering. The kitchen staff knew her as the girl who always returned her teacup already washed. The housemaids knew her as the one who held doors. Nobody knew much else. She kept to the east wing, read to the old man, and left at 5. What nobody knew was that she was paying attention. It started with the medication. On her 3rd visit, tablets on Aldo's side table were different from the ones Mrs. Beld had described. She assumed it was a change she hadn't been told about, noted the name in the margin of her notebook. She kept a small spiral notebook for reminders, and thought no more of it. A week later, the dosage on the bottle had changed. A week after that, a standing afternoon visitor that Aldo had mentioned, a friend of 50 years, named Wreath, was apparently no longer coming. Aldo mentioned it once, briefly, and then did not mention it again. The way he did not mention it told Petra something. She wrote it down. Dates, names, the small discrepancies. She was not dramatic about it. She had no particular framework for what she was observing. She only knew that things were being changed around an old man who could not easily track the changes himself, and that the changes did not appear to be for his benefit. She kept the notebook in her bag, and she kept reading David Copperfield, and she brought a second Dickens in case they finished it. After 6 weeks, she had 4 pages of notes. She looked at them on the bus home one evening, and she understood that she was going to have to tell someone. She had been putting it off because she did not know who to tell, and because she was the girl from the agency, and because the man who ran this house was the kind of man people did not approach in corridors. She approached him in the corridor. It was a Thursday morning, early enough that the main house was still quiet. She had come to return a book Aldo had lent her. Callum Vren was coming from the direction of his study, already in his jacket, already moving at the pace of a man whose day was fully assembled. He was exactly as the household had prepared her to find him. Contained, precise, the kind of stillness that is not ease but mastery. He glanced at her as you glance at a door frame. She said, "Mr. Vren, I'm sorry to stop you. I read to your father. My name is Petra Hale." He stopped. "I have written some things down," she said, "about the East Wing. I think someone should see them." She opened her bag, took out the spiral notebook, and held it toward him. "I may be wrong about some of it. I'm not a medical person. But I wanted you to have it." He took it. He did not dismiss her. He stood in the corridor and he read it, all 4 pages, while she waited. She watched his expression do almost nothing, just a slight, controlled stillness that was somehow more present than any reaction she had expected. He turned back 1 page, read a section again. Then he looked up. "When did this start?" he said. "The medication change was the first thing," she said. "That was 6 weeks ago." He asked 2 more questions, clean and exact. She answered them. He thanked her. A full, considered thank you, not the kind you give to a service provider. And she went to return the book to Aldo's shelf and let herself out the east door. Rouse was trimming the yew along the south path when the nephew's car left that afternoon. It left faster than usual and did not return. He noted it the way he noted most things at Vren House, without comment, filed away. Rouse could not see from the south path was what happened inside. Callum had gone to his father's room himself. Not through Uan, not through Mrs. Beld. He had knocked, which he understood later, was the thing that had surprised Aldo most, that his son had knocked instead of simply not coming. He had sat down in the reading chair that still smelled faintly of the girl's tea. He had asked his father plainly how he was. Not the household version of the question, which expected a particular answer, the real version. Aldo had looked at him for a long time. "Better," the old man said finally, "when I don't have to think about it." The medication was reviewed by the family's physician that same week. Preeth was called and came the following Thursday, bringing a bottle of something and staying 2 hours. The changes Oan had put in place were undone, quietly, and Yuan's access to the East Wing ended. These things were handled lawfully, through proper channels, and Rouse learned of them only in pieces. A word from Mrs. Beld here, a change in the weekly schedule there. He did not need the full account. He was a gardener. He worked by what he could observe. What he observed in the weeks that followed was that the East Wing window stayed lit later and later into the evening. That on 2 occasions he heard, quite clearly from the kitchen garden, not 1 voice from that room but 2, that the second voice was a man's, lower and less frequent, but present. That once, on a still Friday afternoon when the wind had dropped entirely, he heard the old man laugh and the man's voice answer, and the register of that answer was something Rouse had not heard from Callum Vren in a very long time. It was not the voice of a man managing a situation. It was something else. He found out about the rest from Mrs. Beld, who had it from the kitchen, had it from the East Wing housemaid. Callum had come to the kitchen garden on a Saturday morning in November. Petra was waiting before her shift, drinking tea from her thermos on the bench by the cold frames. Because the east door wasn't unlocked yet, he had come down himself in his own time, without sending anyone. He had stood at the end of the garden path for a moment, which Mrs. Beld's source interpreted as nerves, though Rouse thought a more accurate word was care. The way a man who has not allowed himself to want something particular approaches the moment of asking for it. He asked her to stay on, not as the girl from the agency. A full position, with her own terms, with the work defined properly. Reading companion to Aldo, who had asked for her specifically, who had told his son, in the plainest possible language, that she was the first person in 3 years, who had sat with him like he was still himself. She had listened to the offer. She had asked for a day to think about it. She came back on Sunday and said yes. Rouse was the last to hear, first to notice. On a Tuesday afternoon in late November, gray and cold, he was turning the last of the beds by the east wall. Above him, the window was lit warm against the colorless sky. He could hear, quite distinctly, 2 voices, the old man's slow, deliberate reading, and a woman's voice now and then offering a word he had lost. And underneath both of them, a third sound, low and unhurried. It took Rouse a moment to identify. Callum Vren was in his father's room. He was listening, and once, when the old man found the word he'd been reaching for, and said it with a small sound of satisfaction, the feared man laughed. Rouse went back to his turning. Some things at Vrenhouse he filed away without comment. Some things he simply stood still for a moment and let settle, the way good soil takes water, quietly, all the way down. This was one of those.